Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we are jumping right in to dissect the anatomy of an outbreak. We're talking about the Marburg virus, a really lethal pathogen that has just made a terrifying leap into a whole new part of the world. And believe me, we need to understand why this matters to all of us. Okay, let's just start with one number. One number that really puts this whole thing into perspective. 60+%. Think about that. In the current outbreak, more than 60% of the people who've gotten this virus have died. That number, all by itself, tells you exactly why we have to pay attention. But this story isn't just about how deadly Marburg is. It's about where it's suddenly popping up. This is a virus that we thought was, kind of contained to certain areas, and it has just completely jumped the fence. It's shown up for the first time ever in a new country, and that signals that the rulebook we thought we had for this thing might be getting thrown out the window. So here's our game plan for today. First, we'll get you the latest from the ground on what's happening right now. Then we're going to meet the villain of our story, the virus itself. After that, we'll trace how it spreads, and then we're going to zoom way in, go microscopic, to see the absolute war it wages inside the human body. We'll look at what that means for a patient, and then finally, and this is the important part, we'll look at how we can actually fight back. All right, let's start with the breaking news, the urgent situation that's unfolding right now, because this is the backdrop for everything we're about to talk about. So the alarm bells really started going off in late 2025. Health officials confirmed something pretty chilling. Marburg had officially landed in Ethiopia. Now, why is that such a big deal? Because Ethiopia had never, not once in its entire history, recorded a single case. And take a look at this chart, because it really shows you what we mean. See that big bar? That's where Marburg has historically been found, Central and West Africa. Now, look at that little bar all by itself, Ethiopia. This isn't just another small outbreak. It's a huge geographical leap. And what does that tell us? It strongly suggests that the animal carrying it, the fruit bat, is expanding its territory, and it's taking this deadly virus along for the ride. Okay, so that's the what and where. Now let's put the actual agent behind this crisis under the microscope. What exactly is this thing we call the Marburg virus? Well, it comes from a pretty notorious family called Filoviridae. You might not know the family name, but I promise you know its members. We're talking about the viruses that cause some of the absolute worst hemorrhagic fevers known to science. And that brings us to its more famous cousin, Ebola. They're very similar, right? Both cause this terrible disease. But there are a couple of really key differences here. For one, Marburg was actually discovered first, way back in 1967. But here's the kicker. The really crucial difference. For Ebola, we have an approved vaccine. For Marburg, we have nothing. Zero. That is a massive, gaping hole in our global defenses. And when you actually look at this thing under a high-powered microscope, it has this very unique, almost sinister shape. It's this long, stringy particle that's often bent into a U, or even looks like the number 6. That's why it gets called the shepherd's crook virus. It's a very memorable look. And covering its entire surface are these things, glycoprotein spikes. The best way to think of these? They're like the virus's own set of master keys. They're perfectly designed to fit the locks on our own cells, essentially tricking ourselves into opening the door and just letting it waltz right in to start its takeover. So that brings up a big question, right? How does a virus that's just minding its own business in a bat cave suddenly cause a huge, devastating outbreak in humans? Let's follow the trail. Okay, so the journey pretty much always follows this same 3-step pattern. Step 1, it starts in its natural home, the Egyptian fruit bat. The bats carry it, but don't get sick. Step 2 is what we call a spillover event. This is usually when a person, maybe a miner or a tourist, goes into a bat cave and comes into contact with it. And then, step 3, that one person passes it to another, and the human-to-human spread begins. Now, this part is absolutely crucial. How does it spread between people? The good news is it's not airborne. You're not going to get it like you get the flu. It requires direct physical contact with the bodily fluids of someone who is sick. Blood, vomit, you get the picture. And when you think about it, who is most at risk? It's the family members caring for a loved one. It's the doctors and nurses on the front lines. And tragically, it's also why traditional burials, where people touch the body of the deceased, can become these awful super spreader events. Okay, so we've seen how it spreads through a community. Now let's zoom way in, down to the cellular level. Once this virus gets inside your body, what's its plan of attack? what does this invasion actually look like? This virus is honestly a master of sabotage. Its first move, it goes straight for the guards, the first responders of our immune system. Then it does something really sneaky. It disables the body's alarm system, what scientists call the interferon response. It's like a burglar cutting the power and the phone lines before breaking in. With the alarms totally silent, the virus just starts making copies of itself like crazy. Eventually, the immune system does wake up, but it panics, launching this massive, out-of-control counterattack called a cytokine storm. And here's the devastating part. It's this friendly fire from our own bodies that does the real damage. It causes blood vessels to leak and basically destroys our ability to form blood clots. So you've got this catastrophic war happening inside the body. But what does that actually look like for the person going through it? What's the journey for a patient with Marburg? It's a really terrifying progression. It starts out suddenly with things you could easily mistake for the flu, or maybe malaria, a really high fever, a brutal headache, diarrhea. But then, around day 5, the telltale signs start to show up. A rash appears. Then the bleeding starts, from the gums, the nose, and by that second week, the patient is often in a truly critical state, dealing with confusion, shock, and ultimately multi-organ failure. And doctors who've been on the front lines of this have a really haunting way of describing it. They say patients develop a ghost-like appearance. What does that mean? It means deep-set eyes, an expressionless face, an exhaustion so profound they can barely move. It just perfectly captures the unbelievable physical toll this disease takes. Okay, so after hearing all that, the biggest question is obvious. Can we fight this thing? When you're up against a virus this aggressive, what do we actually have in our toolkit? Let's talk about diagnosis, treatment, and hope. Well, step 1 is a fast, accurate diagnosis. The best test we have is called an RT-PCR, which looks for the virus's own genetic code. But here's the thing you have to understand. Safety is everything. Any blood sample, any lab sample at all that might have Marburg in it is immediately treated as a biosafety level threat. That is the absolute highest level of biohazard on the planet. We're talking full-on spacesuits, pressurized labs, airlocks, the whole deal. It is completely non-negotiable if you want to keep lab workers safe. And this table really lays out the two worlds we're living in, the reality of now and the hope for the future. Right now, today, treatment is all about supportive care. That means doctors are basically in a constant battle to keep the patient hydrated and their electrolytes balanced. But on the horizon, there are experimental antivirals being tested. And for prevention, while right now it's all about strict infection control, there are vaccines in the pipeline, in clinical trials, offering the first real glimmer of hope for a specific way to stop this thing before it starts. And really, that brings us to the final, most important question. This outbreak in Ethiopia, it's not just some isolated tragedy happening far away. It's a global warning shot. It's proof that the maps we thought we had for these dangerous viruses are being completely redrawn in real time. So the real question isn't if another virus will make the leap from animals to humans. We know it will. The question is when it will happen next and where. And as the animal world and our world collide more and more, you have to ask yourself, how prepared are we going to be for the next one?